Set in 1938, almost at the start of the Second World War, the film introduces us to Dominic Matane, a 70-year-old Romanian professor who teaches linguistics. Behind his obsession with discovering the origin of human language lies an unhappy soul still yearning for Laura, the great love of his youth. Tired of the empty life he has led so far, Dominic travels to Bucharest to visit the university where he met Laura and remember her for the last time. Having done so, the man heads out, determined to take his own life, but along the way, an electrical lightning bolt hastens his plans by striking him directly. Nevertheless, even though his skin is completely charred, Dominic survives the incident and is admitted to a hospital where his entire body is covered in bandages. There, Dr. Roman deduces his age by asking him to squeeze his hand, which Dominic does 7 times. However, as the days progress and they start removing the bandages, they are surprised to find that Dominic has rejuvenated to adulthood. Generally, lightning strike victims are left blind or mute, but that is not Dominic's case, beyond the fact that his teeth start falling out. The doctors had begun preparing a new set of teeth for him, yet Dominic's body continues to defy logic by growing a new set of teeth on its own. During his recovery, the protagonist recalls his past as a young linguist, when his great love Laura decided to break off their engagement because he was too obsessed with his research, making her feel like an obstacle. Back in the present, Dr. Roman finds it hard to believe that his patient is a 70-year-old professor, despite Dominic asserting it with confidence. Consequently, Dominic must adopt a new identity and accept Roman's invitation to his home so that his case can be studied more thoroughly. There, the professor notices that his memory has improved significantly to the point that he can speak and write in multiple languages with fluency. On another day, Roman searches for the patient's old belongings and confirms that he is indeed 70 years old upon seeing photos of him with Laura. Dominic remembers that she became engaged to someone else and died a year later while giving birth. Later on, he undergoes a medical examination in front of a group of scientists who are fascinated by his case. At night, Dominic often has erotic dreams about a woman staying in room 6, but he cannot be sure if these encounters really happened or if they are just dreams. He decides to speak to her in real life, since Roman mentioned that this woman was sent by the Secret Service to spy on him. In their conversation, the woman confirms that they have met several times, and their last encounter was in room 6. That night, the man again has a vivid dream about her in which she speaks to him in various languages. The next day, Roman tells him that the woman has mysteriously disappeared after reporting all of their intimate conversations to the Gestapo, the Nazi police. Why, you may ask? Well, Dominic's mastery of language has made him the most valuable human on the planet. Gestapo officers quickly confiscate Roman's files and request custody of Dominic, although the doctor refuses, claiming that Dominic is not yet fit to leave. In the following days, Dominic continues to develop his philosophical side, and he can even hold conversations with himself as if he were 2 different people. At one point, he asks his other self to give him some roses, and magically the flowers appear in his lap. Little by little, his abilities catch the attention of the Nazi regime, including a bloodthirsty professor named Joseph Rudolph, who believes that exposure to electrical discharges could create a generation of super soldiers, one of Hitler's great interests. Realizing that Roman cannot protect him much longer, Dominic decides to leave and try his luck in another country. After evading the Nazis several times at checkpoints, we see that by 1941, Dominic has settled in Zurich, Switzerland, where he has learned to live like a secret agent. Thanks to these skills and his special abilities, he can now forge documents, change his address, and prepare disguises to remain unnoticed, although it forces him to have zero contact with friends abroad. He does not know whether Roman is still alive, beyond the fact that the Second World War is wreaking havoc. Dominic tries to focus on writing his book about the origin of language and human consciousness. During his research, he discovers that by merely holding a book for a few seconds, he can learn its contents. A year later, he is almost out of money. The small sum Roman gave him before he fled has dwindled. So Dominic takes part in a blackjack game, intending to win only as much as he needs. However, he is caught off guard by Ted, a reporter who has been following his case for some time and who was sent by a secret American agency to recruit him. Even though Ted offers him money and other benefits, the protagonist declines and leaves. On another occasion, Dominic attends a gala where he is approached by the same Gestapo spy, though this time she does not seem to pose a threat. Still, he decides to distance himself from her, only to run into Tal Mundro, who knows his real identity. Immediately, Dominic tries to flee, but Tal Mundro intercepts him in an alley, labeling him a miracle of humanity and the key to surviving an imminent nuclear war. The woman from before appears and warns Dominic not to trust Talmondro, revealing that he is actually Joseph, the mad scientist. Furious at his comrade's betrayal, Joseph executes her on the spot, and it appears that Dominic will suffer the same fate. However, he uses his newfound telekinetic abilities to force Joseph to shoot himself. Years later, the Second World War finally ends, but Dominic's persecution never does, so he chooses to live reclusively in the Alps, where he continues his research in a completely made-up language. It is not just a method to mislead spies, but a language that, according to his calculations, will be deciphered in 2010. In other words, he is leaving messages for the future. While walking through the Alps, Dominic comes across two women, one of whom introduces herself as Veronica. For Dominic, she is the living reincarnation of Laura. Shortly afterward, at the local police station, he requests a search for the women, fearing something bad might have happened due to the imminent lightning storm. His suspicions prove correct when their car is found by the side of the road. Veronica's friend is passed out near a stream, and Veronica is hidden away in a cave. Although she is terrified, Dominic manages to convince her to accept his help by speaking Sanskrit, the language in which she was praying. At the hospital, the doctors discover that following the incident, Veronica has developed amnesia and other brain injuries. This is evidenced by her belief that she is Rupini, a disciple of Buddha from India, who lived 14 centuries ago. According to her, she had been meditating in the cave for months until a lightning bolt struck, opening its entrance. Because of the complexity of her case, Dominic persuades the doctors caring for her to call Professor Giuseppe, a famous philosopher specializing in Buddhism. He needs just a few minutes with Veronica to confirm that her story about being Rupini is quite real, and he prepares an expedition with her to India, also inviting Dominic. Upon arriving at their destination, the researchers meet a Buddhist monk who recognizes Veronica as Rupini, and so he guides them to the cave where the real Rupini used to meditate. Veronica goes in first, but suddenly faints after opening the cave with a blast. The researchers manage to enter, and Dominic finds an ancient text among old books, but the paper disintegrates to dust as soon as he reads it. Back in Europe, the protagonist checks on Veronica, who has recovered her normal personality. Because of this, Giuseppe interviews her on national television, asking if she knows anything about Buddhism, something she denies. Giuseppe then confirms that, in a past life, she was Rupini, and that her ancestor took over her body through the transmigration of souls. Veronica, however, finds this hard to believe and suspects that evil spirits tried to possess her. After Giuseppe's interview, the woman becomes quite famous among reporters and Buddhist followers, so Dominic stays by her side to protect her. After escaping a group of Buddhists, Veronica excitedly kisses Dominic, starting a beautiful love story. They decide to vacation in Malta, where they stay in a lovely house by the sea. At night, as they sleep together, Dominic whispers that he has always loved her. The moment she hears this, the woman begins to speak in a very ancient language, similar to Egyptian. Suddenly, she moves in twisted ways and growls at Dominic as though she were possessed, but he manages to calm her down with a hug. The following day, the protagonist plays Veronica a tape recording of her speaking Egyptian, explaining that her habit of being possessed by past versions of herself might be the key to his research on the origin of language. Dominic then confesses to her that he is actually 88 years old, despite appearances. That night, they go out to a fancy restaurant to clear their heads, although Veronica confesses that she always feels tired. Dominic deduces that her constant spiritual journeys into the past are beginning to harm her, but he pretends everything is fine so she will not worry. In the early morning, Dominic awakens to find himself alone. Veronica is standing on the rocks by the shore, seriously contemplating throwing herself into the raging sea. He quickly reaches her, and she tells him about a nightmare she had involving Rupini, who knows far more than they do. Despite her distress, Dominic calms her using a power of suggestion. Strangely, Veronica is actually asleep at this moment, and in her dream, we see her as Rupini, being harassed by a demon's hand. The next day, while strolling through town, Veronica believes she sees a double of Dominic following them, although she suspects it might just be a hallucination. In their subsequent sessions, the protagonist takes advantage of Veronica's sensitivity by telling her that he loves her. These magic words cause her soul to retreat into the past, leading her to speak in ancient languages, from Babylonian to Sumerian. As she delves deeper into the past, Veronica's condition worsens, although Dominic does not want to stop until she reaches the very first moment in history, the beginning of everything. However, he is forced to call a doctor who confirms that Veronica is going through menopause, despite being only 25 years old. That is why she is changing. As the days go by, Veronica looks more and more aged. Dominic regrets having manipulated her, even though his other self urges him to do one more regression to achieve his dream. Instead, Dominic chooses to leave her, fearing that his presence may be making her condition worse. Although Veronica begs him to stay, he assures her that his absence will allow her to regain her youth. The only thing he can promise is that he will return in a few months, regardless of whether or not her condition improves. Sometime later, Dominic returns to his native Romania, where he settles in an old hotel and prepares to start his life over. But once again, his other self torments him, explaining that atomic wars will destroy the current humanity and that men like Dominic represent the new generation. The man rejects this theory, thinking that creating a new species at the cost of millions of innocent lives is not worth it. Fed up with listening to his other self, Dominic decides to smash the mirror in which the other self was appearing. After looking through a photo album of his life, he goes downstairs to the bar, where he sees himself in a mirror, but not with his current appearance. Rather, he looks like an old man. Years pass. He reunites with old friends, but must leave them immediately when he feels his teeth falling out. At dawn, Dominic's body is found at the foot of some stairs. Apparently, in his desperation, he slipped and fell to his death. Civilians simply ignore him and walk past, while Dominic, still slightly conscious, hears Veronica asking where she should leave his rose. Seconds later, the rose appears in his hand.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.